The rain fell on Chicago in relentless gray sheets, drumming a somber rhythm against the roof of Ethan Vance's workshop. Inside, the air was warm and smelled of cedar and sawdust, a comforting perfume that had been the backdrop to his life. Ethan ran a hand over the plank of bird's eye maple he'd just brought home, its surface smooth as silk, its grain a constellation of tiny, intricate whorls. It was perfect. It had cost him a week's wages, but it would make a magnificent jewelry box for Chloe, a third anniversary gift he'd been planning for months. She deserved something beautiful, something crafted with a love that was as patient and detailed as the work of his hands. He left the wood to acclimate in the dry warmth of the shop and walked toward the house, the chill of the autumn evening seeping into his bones. He was smiling as he stepped through the back door, ready to call out her name, when her voice, tinny and sharp through a speakerphone, stopped him cold. "I can't do it anymore, Mom. I can't be married to a carpenter. He comes home every day, smelling of wood stain, and his hands, they're like sandpaper." A pause, then a sigh that was pure theater. "I deserve more. Blake says I have the face and the personality for his new lifestyle podcast. He thinks I could be a star." And Bo. Ethan froze in the small mudroom, his hand still on the doorknob. The grocery bag he held, containing a bottle of wine and the expensive dark chocolate Chloe loved, suddenly felt impossibly heavy. His heart, which had been light with anticipation moments before, was now a leaden weight in his chest. "He's just so simple," Chloe continued, her voice dripping with a familiar condescension he'd often ignored. "He's content in that dusty workshop of his, making his little projects. I'm about to launch a brand, Mom. I can't have a husband who looks like he just stepped out of a lumberyard. I need financial freedom, social mobility. I need to be untethered." Her mother's voice crackled back, a serpent's hiss. "Darling, I told you from the start he was just a stepping stone. A nice enough man, but not husband material for a girl with your ambitions. You need connections. You need wealth." "I know you were right," Chloe said, and then she laughed. It was a light, tinkling sound that he had once found endearing. Now it hollowed him out, scooping out his insides and leaving nothing but a cold, echoing void. "Anyway, Blake's already found us a condo in River North. He's even helping with the deposit. I'm going to tell Ethan tomorrow." The world tilted on its axis. The gentle, predictable life he had built, board by board, nail by nail, was a facade, a lie. He silently placed the groceries on the small hallway table, careful not to make a sound. Rainwater dripped from his jacket, forming a small, dark puddle at his feet, a stain spreading on the hardwood floor he had so carefully installed himself. He turned and walked back out the way he came, closing the door without a whisper of sound. He didn't drive aimlessly. He went straight to his workshop, his sanctuary. He sank into the hand-carved mahogany armchair that had been his weekend project for the last 6 months, its sweeping curves a testament to his patience. There was no rage, no storm of tears, no dramatic confrontation. There was only a perfect cold clarity washing over him, as sharp and clean as the edge of a freshly honed chisel. He watched the rainwater cascade down the copper gutters he'd installed last summer, each drop a tiny, insignificant tragedy in a much larger storm. His first thought wasn't about Chloe's betrayal or the end of his marriage. It was about his grandfather, Arthur Sterling, on the day before he died. The old man's hand, gnarled with age but still surprisingly strong, had gripped his. "Patience, Ethan," Arthur had rasped, his eyes still sharp. "The Sterling family has survived for generations because we know how to watch, wait, and then act decisively. Never let emotion cloud your judgment. The right move at the right time. That is everything." At 32 years old, sitting in the quiet hum of his workshop while his world fell apart, Ethan Vance was about to find out if he was truly his grandfather's heir in more than just name. The scent of maple filled the air, no longer a promise of a gift, but a reminder of what was real and true. Wood didn't lie. Wood had a grain, a truth to it. And now, so did he. A plan, cold and precise, began to form in the quiet stillness of his mind. The next morning, the kitchen was filled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, a domestic ritual that felt like a scene from a different life. Ethan stood by the counter, dressed in his usual work clothes, a flannel shirt, and sturdy jeans, calmly pouring the dark liquid into 2 mugs. He had not slept, but his movements were steady, deliberate. Chloe entered the kitchen, wrapped in a silk robe he'd given her for their 2nd anniversary. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her makeup subtly applied. She never looked unprepared, Her steps faltered when she saw him. She had clearly expected an empty house, or perhaps a confrontation. His placid presence threw her off balance. "Morning," he said, his voice a neutral, even tone. He slid a mug across the granite countertop toward her. "Coffee?" "Sure," she replied, her eyes narrowing slightly as she studied his face for any sign of a storm. She found none. She took the mug, her painted nails a stark red against the white ceramic. "Ethan, we need to talk." He nodded, taking a slow sip from his own mug. The coffee was bitter, but he didn't mind. "About you leaving me?" Her eyes widened. The mug stopped halfway to her lips. The carefully constructed mask of composure cracked. "How? How did you know?" "I came home early yesterday. Heard you on the phone with your mother." "Oh." A single, small syllable hung in the air between them, thick with guilt and surprise. To her credit, she didn't deny it or attempt to spin a web of excuses. She was a strategist in her own way, and she knew when a position was indefensible. Instead, she squared her shoulders, her chin lifting in a gesture of defiance. "Then you know, I think we should get a divorce." This clearly wasn't the opening salvo she had practiced. She had prepared for his tears, for pleading, for anger. She had a script for every emotional outburst. She had no script for this. He nodded again, his gaze unwavering. "I agree." The two words were more disarming than any shout could have been. You agree?" "Yes," he said, placing his mug in the sink. "You're right. We want different things. There's no point dragging this out." She hesitated, pressing on, trying to regain control of the conversation. "I was thinking we could do this amicably. No need for a long court battle or anything messy." "Absolutely," he said, his voice still unnervingly steady. "In fact, you can have everything." This stopped her completely. "Everything?" "Everything," he confirmed, turning to face her fully. "The house, the car, the joint savings account, even that antique dining set your mother is so fond of. I don't want any of it. Just my tools and my personal belongings." A flash of pure, unadulterated triumph crossed her face before she could catch it and rearrange her features into an expression of sympathetic concern. That's very generous of you, Ethan. Are you sure?" "I'm sure," he said. "I'll move out this weekend. I can stay with a friend for a while." Relief washed over her, visible in the sudden relaxing of her posture. She had won. It had been easier than she could have possibly imagined. "I think that's for the best," she said, her voice smooth as silk once more. "I've already spoken with a lawyer. He can draw up the papers. If we're both agreeable, this could all be over within a month." "Perfect," Ethan said, grabbing his keys from the counter. "Text me the details. I need to get to the workshop." As he walked to the door, she called after him, a final, perfunctory gesture of concern. "Ethan, are you okay?" He turned, and for the first time that morning, he allowed himself a small, cryptic smile. "I will be, Chloe. We both will be." The look of utter confusion on her face as he closed the door behind him was the first genuinely satisfying moment he'd experienced in 24 hours. The bargain had been struck. The trap had been set. All he had to do now was play his part. The ensuing weeks were a masterclass in carefully crafted appearances. Ethan moved not into a friend's spare room, but into an old dusty hunting cabin on the outskirts of Cook County, a forgotten property that had been in his family for decades. He told everyone it belonged to a buddy who was out of state. It was small and smelled of damp earth and disuse, a perfect stage for his role as the jilted, broken husband. He swapped his reliable pickup for his grandfather's old work truck, a rusted Ford with manual windows and a heater that only worked intermittently. He let his beard grow, a scruffy, unkempt shadow that hid the sharp line of his jaw. He wore his oldest, most worn-out clothes, stained with varnish and paint, and allowed a permanent look of exhaustion to settle in his eyes. He was the very picture of a man who had lost everything and didn't have the energy to care. The performance was convincing. He saw Chloe by pure chance one afternoon at a discount grocery store. He was loading a cheap bag of potatoes and a carton of milk into the bed of his rusted truck when her sleek, white BMW pulled into the lot. She wore oversized sunglasses and a silk scarf, looking like a movie star trying to go incognito. Their eyes met briefly across the asphalt expanse. He saw a flicker of pity, mixed with a clear sense of relief that she had escaped such a fate. He gave her a single, tired nod of acknowledgement, then climbed into his truck and drove away, the engine rattling in protest. Later that evening, he received a text message from her. "Ethan, are you doing okay for money? I can help if you need it. The irony was so perfect, so deliciously sharp, that he almost laughed out loud. He deleted the message without replying. His small circle of friends and colleagues noticed the change, of course. They offered sympathetic words and invitations for drinks he always politely declined. The principal at the local community college, where he sometimes taught a woodworking course, called him into her office. "Ethan," she said gently, "I've noticed you seem distant lately. I want you to know that if you're going through personal difficulties, we have resources. Counseling, time off if you need it." "I appreciate that, Maria," he said, his voice husky. "Chloe and I are getting divorced. It's amicable, but it's been tough." "I understand," she said, her expression one of genuine concern. "Just know that your work hasn't suffered. In fact, some of your students have mentioned your teaching seems even more focused lately." It was true. There was a strange freedom in no longer carrying the weight of Chloe's expectations. In the classroom and in his workshop, he could be fully present, fully himself. No part of him was bracing for the subtle criticism or the unfavorable comparisons that awaited him at home. Meanwhile, behind the curtain of this sad play, the real work was being done. 2 days after signing the divorce papers, he had met with Mr. Caldwell, his grandfather's attorney, a man as old and sturdy as the oak paneling in his downtown office. "The waiting period has elapsed, Mr. Sterling," Caldwell had said, his voice crisp. "The divorce will soon be final. Your grandfather's instructions can now be followed." Ethan had reverted to his mother's maiden name, Vance, 5 years ago, shortly after marrying Chloe. He had seen the early signs of her dissatisfaction, her growing obsession with the glamorous lives she saw on social media. His grandfather, with his unerring foresight, had listened quietly and then suggested the name change. "A precautionary measure, my boy," he had called it. "A way to see who loves the man, not the money." Now, sitting in the dusty cabin, Ethan felt a pang of guilt for deceiving the good people like Maria who worried about him. But it was a necessary deception. It was another item to be laid at the feet of Chloe's betrayal. The stage was set. The final act was about to begin. The article dropped on a Tuesday, exactly 3 days after the divorce was finalized. It landed not with a whisper, but with the force of a thunderclap across Chicago's business and social circles. Chloe was at a chic rooftop bar with Blake, celebrating. She held up a glass of champagne, the city lights twinkling below them like a carpet of fallen stars. "To new beginnings," she said, clinking her glass against his, "and to finally being free." Blake smiled, a slick, predatory grin. "To us, babe, your podcast is going to be huge. The Chloe Vance experience. I can see it now." It was then that Blake's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his smile faltering. "Huh, that's weird." He showed the screen to Chloe. It was a link from a friend with the message, "Isn't this your girlfriend's ex-husband?" The headline on the Chicago Business Chronicle's website read, "The Sterling Legacy Continues. Mysterious Philanthropist Ethan Sterling to Helm Fame Foundation." Chloe's blood ran cold. She snatched the phone. There, beneath the headline, was a photograph. It was from Arthur Sterling's funeral 2 years ago. A younger, clean-shaven Ethan stood beside the casket, his face solemn, wearing a perfectly tailored suit that cost more than the car she was now driving. He looked powerful, somber, and completely unrecognizable as the simple carpenter she had discarded. She read the article with trembling hands. It detailed the Sterling family's immense wealth, their long history of shaping the city's skyline and culture, and the colossal charitable foundation. They oversaw a multi-billion-dollar entity that supported arts and education. It stated that the sole heir, Ethan Sterling, grandson of the late Arthur Sterling, who had been living quietly under a different name for years, would now be taking his rightful place as the head of the family and the foundation. Sterling. The name echoed in her mind, a name she had heard whispered at charity events she'd longed to attend. It was a name synonymous with old money, power, and prestige. "No," she whispered, "it can't be." "Is that him?" Blake asked, his voice suddenly stripped of its earlier bravado. He was looking at Ethan's photo with a mixture of awe and terror. "His name is Ethan Vance," she said, more to convince herself than him. "He's a carpenter. He makes furniture." Well, it looks like he also owns half the damn city," Blake muttered, already taking a step back from her, his eyes darting around as if he was looking for an escape route. The dream of their shared future was evaporating before her very eyes. His interest had been in Chloe, the aspiring influencer with a pitiful but soon-to-be-gone ex. He had no interest in being associated with the woman who had foolishly divorced one of the wealthiest men in the Midwest. Her phone began to vibrate, a call from her mother. She ignored it. Her hands shaking, she found Ethan's number in her contacts. She had to hear it from him. It had to be a mistake. A different Ethan Sterling. He answered on the second ring. His voice was calm, steady, exactly as it had been that morning in the kitchen. "Hello, Chloe." "Ethan," she choked out, her voice a strangled whisper. "This article about Ethan Sterling, is that you?" There was a brief pause, a silence that stretched for an eternity. Then, the calm, devastating reply. "Yes, it's me. Vance is my mother's name. I changed my legal name back to Sterling after the divorce was final. It was my grandfather's wish." A sound escaped her lips, something between a laugh and a sob. Her world was fracturing, the pieces falling away to reveal a terrifying new reality. The champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the rooftop terrace, the sound lost in the vast, indifferent noise of the city. She had not just left her husband, she had thrown away a kingdom. Ethan chose the coffee shop deliberately. It was a busy, unassuming place on a corner in Lincoln Park, public enough to prevent a scene, casual enough that his simple jeans and button-down shirt wouldn't look out of place. He wanted no part of the life Chloe craved, not even in its setting. She was already there, seated at a table by the window. She had dressed for an entirely different occasion. A form-fitting blue dress he didn't recognize, hair and makeup immaculate, the diamond earrings he'd given her for their first anniversary catching the afternoon light. She looked like a woman trying to win back a fortune. "Ethan," she said, her voice soft and breathy as he approached. She started to rise, then thought better of it and sank back into her chair. He sat across from her, noting the 2 coffee cups already on the table. "You remembered my order," he stated, not as a question. "Black, no sugar." "Of course," she said, a fragile smile playing on her lips. "Some things you don't forget." He took a sip, watching her over the rim of the cup. She was nervous, her fingers tapping a frantic rhythm against her own mug. "You look good," she offered. "Different, but good." What did you want to talk about, Chloe?" he asked, cutting through the pleasantries. She flinched at his directness. I wanted to apologize," she stammered, "for how things ended. For what I said about you. About our marriage. I made a terrible, terrible mistake." "Apology accepted," he said flatly. "Is that all?" Her eyes widened, filling with tears. This was not going according to her script. "Ethan, please. I'm trying here. I didn't know. I never imagined that I was secretly wealthy," he finished for her, his voice devoid of emotion. "So that's your mistake? Not the lying? Not the affair with Blake? Not the years of making me feel like I was never good enough for you? Just the fact that you didn't realize I had money." The color drained from her face. "You knew about Blake?" "I suspected." Grandfather's lawyer confirmed it. "It was a mistake," she said quickly, leaning forward. "He was nothing. I was confused, feeling trapped. You were always so content with your woodworking, with our simple life. I wanted more." Her eyes met his, suddenly desperate and direct. "And now I realize what I threw away. Not the money, Ethan, I swear. It's you, your steadiness, your kindness, the way you always supported my silly dreams." There was a time when this confession would have been everything to him. He would have given anything to hear her say she'd made a mistake, that she still loved him. Now, listening to her practice words, he felt nothing but a distant, clinical sadness for the man he used to be. "The divorce is final, Chloe," he said quietly. "We've both moved on." "Have we?" she asked, reaching across the table to touch his hand. He withdrew it before her fingers could make contact. "Ethan, we could start over. A fresh beginning. I know I hurt you, but we had something real once. We could have it again." He shook his head slowly, a gesture of finality. "No, Chloe, we can't. What we had wasn't real. It was your fantasy of a glamorous life and my fantasy of a loving wife. Neither of us was being honest with who we were." "That's not true," she insisted, her voice rising. "I loved you. I still love you." "Do you?" he challenged, his gaze piercing. "Or do you love the idea of being Mrs. Chloe Sterling? Of having access to the lifestyle you always dreamed of? 2 weeks ago, you couldn't wait to be rid of the carpenter. Nothing has changed, except my bank balance." She recoiled as if he had slapped her. Tears now flowed freely down her cheeks, ruining her perfect makeup. "Please," she begged, her voice cracking. "Give me another chance. Let me prove to you that I've changed." He studied her face, searching for a flicker of genuine remorse, a single grain of truth in the performance. Perhaps, in her own twisted way, she did regret it. But it was the regret of a gambler who had folded a royal flush. It was too late. "I'm sorry, Chloe," he said, his voice gentle but firm as steel. "The answer is no." He stood up, leaving his coffee half finished. "Goodbye. I wish you well, truly, but we're done." He walked out of the coffee shop without looking back, though he could feel her eyes on him through the window. The cool autumn air felt fresh, clean. For the first time in years, he felt completely and utterly free. The Sterling Foundation Gala was held at the Chicago Museum of Art, a grand institution whose entire modern wing had been funded by his great-grandfather a century ago. The air buzzed with the quiet murmur of the city's elite. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm, golden glow on marble floors, and the scent of expensive perfume mingled with the faint, pleasant aroma of aged oil paint from the masterpieces on the walls. Ethan Sterling, dressed in a bespoke tuxedo that fit him like a second skin, moved through the crowd with an easy, unassuming grace. He was not playing a part anymore. He was simply himself, the man who could discuss 18th century joinery techniques with the same quiet authority as he could discuss the foundation's endowment with the mayor. He shook hands, accepted congratulations, and listened more than he spoke, a trait that the powerful and garrulous people around him found both rare and refreshing. It was during a conversation with the museum director that he saw her. Chloe. She stood near the entrance, a stark, beautiful figure in a shimmering black gown. She was not on the guest list. He had checked personally. She must have come as someone's +1 or talked her way past security. Her eyes scanned the room, desperate and searching, until they locked with his. She offered a tentative, hopeful smile. He did not return it. Excusing himself, he made his way toward her, his path clearing as people recognized him. He felt like a ship parting the waves. "You shouldn't be here, Chloe," he said when he reached her, his voice low and steady amidst the surrounding chatter. "I needed to see you," she replied, her hand reaching out to clutch his arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "You haven't answered my calls." "Because there's nothing left to say," he said, gently but firmly removing her hand. "Please leave." "Not until you hear me out," she insisted, her voice gaining a sharp, desperate edge. "Ethan, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I know that now. Everyone deserves a second chance." "Not everyone," he said. "Some things can't be undone. This isn't about forgiveness, Chloe. It's about consequences. You made your choice. Now you have to live with it." Her expression hardened, the mask of contrition falling away to reveal raw, bitter anger. "So that's it? You get to play the wounded husband, inherit a fortune, and leave me with nothing after 3 years of my life?" "You got exactly what you asked for in the divorce," he reminded her calmly. "The house, the car, everything. What more do you want?" "I want you," she hissed, her composure finally shattering. "The man I married, the man I loved." MC. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw not the woman he had once adored, but a stranger chasing a ghost. "That man doesn't exist anymore. Perhaps he never did." A brittle, ugly laugh escaped her lips, drawing glances from nearby guests. "So this is your revenge, flaunting all this in my face, making me see what I gave up." "No, Chloe," he said, and his voice was laced with a final, weary sadness. "This was never about you. That's what you never understood. My life, my choices, they don't revolve around you." "Mr. Sterling?" A calm voice interrupted them. It was Mr. Caldwell, his ever-present counsel. "They're ready for your speech." Ethan nodded. "Thank you." He turned back to Chloe for the last time. "Goodbye, Chloe. Please don't contact me again." He walked away, leaving her standing alone in her borrowed finery. As he took the stage and approached the podium, he caught a glimpse of her slipping out a side door, her black dress vanishing into the darkness beyond. Security, alerted by a discreet signal from Caldwell, was already moving to ensure she did not return. He looked out at the assembled guests, at the expectant faces of the city's most influential people. He cleared his throat. "Good evening," he began, his voice clear and confident, resonating through the grand hall. "My grandfather, Arthur Sterling, taught me that true value isn't found in what you own, but in what you build." He spoke not of finance or endowments, but of legacy and purpose. He announced the Foundation's newest initiative, the Artisans' Heritage Project, a multi-million-dollar program dedicated to funding scholarships and providing workshop spaces for young, underprivileged craftspeople. He was merging his two worlds, honoring the grain of truth in both his identities. Later that night, the gala was over. The guests were gone, leaving only the scent of their perfume and the ghosts of their conversations behind. Ethan stood alone by a large arched window, looking out at the glittering tapestry of the city. He felt a profound sense of peace. He hadn't won a battle against Chloe. He had won a war for his own soul. He had protected his grandfather's legacy, and in doing so, he had finally begun to build his own. The past was a closed chapter, filed away like a finished blueprint. Before him lay the clean, unmarked lumber of the future, waiting for the patient, steady hand of a master craftsman.